everyone. My name is João Leite. I'm an associate from Data Meaning, and thank you for joining the Alteryx Server webinar series. Today, we'll be covering a user overview of the Alteryx Gallery. If you'd like to learn more about Alteryx and how to empower your organization with decisions, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. We post a lot of content each day about data, analytics, and business intelligence. As a reminder, this session will be recorded and sent out via email. If you don't receive it, please let us know so we can send you the link. Thank you again for being here. Before we begin, I'm just going to quickly talk about Data Meaning. We are a business intelligence consultancy founded in 2005. We offer end-to-end BI solutions, and we have offices and people working from around the globe. Our services cover creative services, business intelligence, data, change and delivery management, and trainings. We also have partners with a lot of softwares and services that are top of the market solutions. So Alteryx, AWS, Azure, Snowflake, Tableau, among some others here. Now, the agenda for the webinars is as follows. We are on the second one. Last week, we had the introduction, and then few next weeks, we have those other ones here. This one is just for the user side overview. The agenda for today. So today we'll be talking about the gallery overview, how it works, so the basic layout of the gallery, the whole roles a user can have, how to collaborate or share the workflows on the gallery so other users can access it. And then we'll talk about the menu, so the walkthrough for each one of the options on the gallery. First one is profile, the second one is the landing page and the searching functionality. Third one is the workflows, where I'll show you how to use a workflow, how to schedule a workflow, how to see the results, how to edit some of the settings in there. Note that workflows are mainly for developers, like most of the stuff there will be for developers, but there's also some things that viewers or members can use. Then I'll show you the districts, insights, collections, workflow results, where you can see everything that ran on your gallery, scheduling results, and a new thing that popped up on 21.4, the version, which is the data connection manager. Then we'll just recap the webinar series map, and we'll go to the Q&A sessions. If you have any questions while I'm speaking or showing, please send them to the Q&A part. And we have Cesar here as well. He'll be answering some of those. And we'll leave some of the questions at the end so I can answer them. Let me just enable the laser pointer here because sometimes I'm going to show some things and this is easier to see. Now for the gallery overview. Basic layout of the Alteryx Gallery. It is divided in two parts. A public part where everyone from your company can access, which is basically the Alteryx Gallery itself, districts, and public workflows. The Alteryx Gallery, basically the user needs to go to the browser, type in the link, and connect to the gallery. For public workflows, whenever we upload a workflow to the gallery, we can set it to public. Just know that if we set it to public, every single person that has access to the gallery will be able to see. And if the user has access to run, he'll also be able to run the workflow. So we usually don't leave like private data or more detailed workflows as public. We have other ways to do this. And then districts are just folders for saving public workflows, because instead of just having a huge list of public workflows, you can add tags to them and add them to districts. Districts need to be created by admins. So if you want one created, please ask your Alteryx admin or someone with admin access to create it for you, because you cannot, as a user, you cannot create this on your own. And the second part of the layout of the gallery is a more private one. So basically we have collections. They are similar to districts, but we have a more organized way of handling users and groups that have access to them. So basically I can just create a collection for certain users to access, like 3 or 4 members, instead of everyone that has access to the gallery. And then you have your workspace. Now, the workspace, it was previously called Private Studio. Now after 21.4, it was renamed and it's now My Workspace. Every time you upload a workflow to the gallery, you see it here. About the roles on the gallery, we have the creator, which is the admin. Basically has admin access. He can also edit the access of other members, and he does not have access to workflows or insights of other users. We have the artisans, which are the developers. They have access to the private studio, which is now my workspaces. They can create collections if they have enough access. They can access districts or the public gallery. They also use the Alteryx Designer to publish workflows to the gallery. We have the viewers or members. Now, those are the end users. Here, there's a difference between viewer and member. You'll see it on the next slide. But they basically don't have access to a workspace. They cannot upload anything to the gallery. They can only run or view a collection if they have access to it. And members can run the workflows that are on the collections or on districts. And no access is a default one. This one is used when we create the Alteryx server. So whenever a user never accessed the gallery before, by default, it has no access. After it accesses at least once, it usually is viewer, but that depends on the Alteryx server configuration. By default, it will be set to viewer. And then no access cannot do anything. So basically, he doesn't have even access to the landing page. About the roles now. Now, this is a better view of what each one of the roles do. Here, no access. He doesn't have access to anything, basically. Viewers can only view and run public workflows, and members can run the public ones and also the ones in the collections. Artisans are the developers, so they can publish workflows, they can view and run private workflows in their workspace, they can add assets to collections and even create them if they have enough access, and they can share them to the private gallery. And creators are the admins, so they can administer all collections and have API access. Note that even though admin API access is here, artisans can also use APIs. We have we have another session about this on the webinar series that will talk specifically about API connections. About collaboration. Let's say I have a marketing report workflow, which is this one here, and I uploaded it to my workspace. If it's on my workspace, only I will have access to it, and anyone on the gallery cannot see it. Now, let's say I want to add it to a collection. On my company, I have the sales collection, the marketing collection, and the finance collection. As this is a marketing one, I'll just add it to the marketing collection. Now, I will do this if it's like a private report that no one else can see. And if I have to have strict access controls to it, like only certain members of the team can access it and view the results. So we will use a collection here. If I have a report that's more broad, that everyone on the company can see and everyone needs to have access to it somehow, I have to add it as a public one to my company gallery. Now, let's say that in my company gallery, I have some districts as well. I have a report one, a sales one, and a macro one. As this is a reporting one, I could just go ahead and add it to the report district. This way, everyone on the Alteryx company gallery will be able to run this and see the final results. So just a quick recap. Authorized users and parent, meaning where it origins from, is my workspace. This is basically where everything will sit initially when we upload a workflow there. And then for authorized users, I can use collections. If everyone needs to have access to it, I'll add it to my company's gallery. Basically, I'll just go to the workflow and tag it as public. And if I need to go to a certain district with this workflow, I just go to the workflow itself and add a tag that represents that district. So it's on a folder, it is easier to find and very easier to see here. Now about the Alteryx Gallery itself. When we enter the Alteryx Gallery the first time, here is the landing page. And this is the landing page for 21.1. If you have a previous version, this might be different. And also if you have a version prior to 21.4, you won't be able to see those DCM options, and you'll also be able to see the private studio option here. After 21.4, the layout changed a bit. So if you don't see something similar here, It's because your version is different. First thing to do when you join the gallery is usually go to your profile. So go to the upper right side here, click on your name, and you see my profile. I'm an admin, so I see this option, but by default, you only be able to see the my profile page here. So just click on it, and then you'll be sent to your profile page. On this page, you'll be able to see your name, your email, some general settings like your name, the time zone that you have defined by default, and then some other options. The best options to see here are the workflow defaults, because you see the username and the password you'll be running workflows as, email notifications if you want to disable something, permissions if you can create collections, schedule jobs, prioritize jobs, assign jobs, and have API access. And if you have API access, then you will also see your keys here to access the gallery. Now, let's say, for example, I'm a new user on the gallery and I want to run a workflow. I might not be able to if I don't have enough access. Then I need to request my admin. Now, let's say I want to schedule a job, but the button for scheduling jobs is grayed out. If I go to my profile and I check here, I should see an X if I cannot schedule jobs. So I need to request the admin to give me access. Same thing for the collections one that was up here, or any other one here as well. For developers, the best part of the profile is to check the server version. We always recommend using the same version for Designer as the server one is. So 21.1, I'm going to use Alteryx Designer 21.1. If I use Alteryx Designer in a newer version than on the gallery, it won't work. Like, let's say we have already 21.2, then I won't be able to do anything because the Designer will be on a different version. Sometimes on a previous version of Designer, you still are able to connect to the gallery. So let's say I'm 21.4, I am able to connect to 21.1, but it's not really recommended because some errors might occur. So always make sure to check here if you are developing the Alteryx Server version you have. Now back to the landing page that we were before. We also have the search bar up here. So basically I can type anything here to see if my gallery already has some workflows that I can use. So let's say, for example, I type in finance and click on enter. I'll see all the results for finance. And then I can filter them for workflows, insights, districts, or pages. I'll show insights in a bit. Districts are the folders where you can publicly share the workflows in a more organized way. And then pages are mostly documentations. Back to the landing page, we also have the workflow area. So down here, you'll be able to see your workspace. So this is where all of your workflows will go whenever you upload them to the gallery now. We have the shared with me option, which basically is whenever someone shares a workflow with you, you'll be able to see them here. And the public one is the same option you see on the districts. All of the public workflows will show up here on your gallery. And as I mentioned here on the search bar, you'll be able to see them here or here whenever you want. Instead of searching here, you can also go to public, search here, or go to your files. If you have a lot of workflows, you can also search your own files here and use the shared with me the same way. About the menu here, so as you saw on the agenda, we'll go to districts, insights, collections, workflow results, schedules, and here is data connection manager. We have the data sources and we have credentials. Now, before we begin going through each one of those sessions, I'm going to show how to run a workflow on the gallery, and I'm going to use this map a trade area as an example. So in here, we can see the name of the workflow. I can edit this because I'm the owner. I can see that it's sitting on my studio right now, and I have the details. Those details here, whenever we are on Alteryx Designer, we can check the metadata for the workflow and add those descriptions. And whenever we upload them to the gallery, those descriptions will also be here. Here we can change the icon. We can see the studio, we can see the owner, if it's using AMP engine, which is for multiple thread processing. And also we can edit the tags. So let's say I want to make this public. I come here, I enable the public workflow option, and then this will be in my public area on the gallery. Now, if I have specific tags set on my Alteryx gallery, for example, administrators, data meaning, development, finance, healthcare, HR, sales, marketing, whatever. An admin has to define those on the configurations for the gallery. I can set a tag, let's say, for example, for training. And then let's say on my district, I have a training district. This will show up there because I have it set as public, I have the tag as training, and I have a district for training that accepts this tag. Now, here we also have the workflow results. So whenever we run this, every single time that I run this, a log will be saved here with the results, the complete time, the length it took to run the workflow, the type, it can be manual or scheduled, worker, I can assign a specific worker, and who ran this. If I click on the arrow here, I'll be able to see the run log. This is useful for whenever, for example, let's say this is okay, so no errors were found, but let's say I had an error. I can open the log here and see what's going on and try to filter out what's through an error or something, or even talk to the developer. Let's say I'm an end user and I cannot open this. I can send a message to the developer with the log and tell him, okay, this didn't run, why? He will solve it some way. Here we can see the versions. So I can see the latest version and the published version. We have two of those because I can change those if needed. Let's say, for example, I have 3 versions of the workflow. I have an initial one, then I improved something, then I changed the final output name, for example. And every time I change and save it, I'm going to save a new version here if I open them from the gallery. But let's say, for example, I want to run an older version. I can set it as published instead of the latest one. If I click on the number here, on the number 1, this window will pop up, which is basically the version history. I can see who published it, who is the author. So let's say I shared this with someone and someone made a change and saved it again. It will be version 2 and another name will pop up here. I can run this specific version, I can download this specific version, and I can change the published version. So as I mentioned, let's say that someone on my team improved the report and make it faster or made the final output better. I can just change here to 2. And when I save this, this will go to number 2. And every time we run the latest version. If I want to go back to my own version, I can use version 1, save it, and then this will be 1. And here we'll have latest version as 2. Now, another option here, we have those 3 dots up here. We have the replace workflow option, we have the delete option, and we have the workflow settings. This is very important if you are going to share your workflow with other people. When you open this, you can select some options here to enable other users to download the workflow, to enable users to run this on the gallery. Now, let's say for some reason, you don't want users to run it on the gallery, you want them to run this on their own machine. You can enable them to download, but not run. Now, let's say you want to only enable them to run on the gallery, you can disable downloads. Here you can enable users to view the workflow history. Now, in order for them to view the history, they need to have specific access on the collections or on districts to be able to see them. And when you have a sandbox environment for Alteryx Server, you can make it ready to be migrated. Here we can assign a worker. Workers are basically the users, not the users, the machines that are going to run the workflow itself. If you leave them unassigned, it will just assign a worker random in a random way to run this. But if you have for example, a sales worker or a marketing worker for each one of the departments on your company, you can just click here, select the worker one, click on save, and every single time you run this workflow, it will go to this worker. The run mode is something a little more specific. The unrestricted run mode will run everything, regardless of the tools or access you have. If I click here, I'll have 2 other options. The semi-safe, which blocks workflows that doesn't write or read data from the workflow itself. Now, let's say, for example, I have a company and I have a server path, a UNC path, for example, that everyone has access. If the workflow is writing or reading to that server path and I'm running on semi-safe, it won't run. I need to run it on the server machine only on semi-safe. And finally, I have the safe option. The save option has the semi-safe functions and also blocks some other tools, events, and data connector. For example, I cannot run Python on safe options because sometimes Python codes can do some other stuff that Alteryx cannot like block. So the safe options is better if you want to restrict users from running like different things on your gallery that you're not sure are going to be safe for the environment, or if they're not connecting to things you want them to connect to. So the safe option needs to be controlled by the admin. Other options here are the download tool, the schedule tool. For scheduling, I'll show you later how to schedule workflow, how to see the results of schedules and everything. But for now, I'm showing you how to run the workflow. If I click here, and this is just a simple workflow, it's going to run. Like this is a default workflow, IX and D. So there is no configurations needed. If I click on run, it's only going to add a row here on my results. The status will just a spinning bar while it's running. And when it ends, I'll see an OK here. If this was an app, Alteryx app, when I click on run, I would see another window here. And then all of the options that the app has. So let's say I need to select a date, I'll see the calendar. If I need to write a text, I'll see a text box. And then I'll need to click on run again. On previous versions of the Alteryx Gallery, you always had to click run and then run again. But on those newer ones, they made it better. So if you have just a default workflow, just click on run, it runs. You don't have to click it twice anymore. Now, when you click on results and you want to see what the results were, if you click on the arrow, you see the log. And if you click on the name here, you'll be able to see the final outputs. Note that this one has 0 outputs. You only have a browse tool inside of it. So nothing is seen here. But let's say I have a report, like an Excel report or a final spreadsheet that I'm saving. This will be like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll be able to see the table here with the results that I have. Now for districts. As I mentioned, districts are just folders for public workflows. So I can have different districts here. I can assign images to them as well, but know that Alteryx admins need to create those. Users cannot create districts. When I click on one of the districts here, I can just see which one of the workflows are here. If I click on one, I can see the tags that are being used. And the workflows here are also accessible via the public option on my workspace. So if you see here, for example, this analytic app solution by Connor is also shown up here. So I have access to the workflows on both ways. It's just easier to access whenever we are here. Insights. Insights are basically dashboards that we can prepare inside Alteryx Designer and upload them to the Alteryx Gallery. Note that for insights to work, the Alteryx server needs to have them enabled. And we also need to have a worker to render the insights. So here I added an example report. Whenever I access the insights, I can just click on its name, and I'll be able to access the dashboard here. I have this clear button because this is interactive. So I can select, for example, if I select formula, I will just be seeing data for formula, for Florida, sorry. And if I select, for example, 2017 here, this will update and show me only data for 2017. It's a very simple thing, similar to how Power BI or Tableau works. They are all interactive, and I can clear the filters from here, make changes or anything to see the data. And if I go to Alteryx Designer itself, this is a GIF from Alteryx Designer, I can configure specific filters before uploading or make some changes here. Just remove the mouse here. And then if you want to learn more about Alteryx Insight, the community has a tool mastery guide on it. So you'll be able to see how to create the dashboards, how to upload the dashboards, how to make filters, how to change the colors and everything. And also to update those on the gallery, you need to make some specific options inside the Insight tool before uploading. Otherwise, they won't show up here. If you just upload your workflow that has an insight output, but did not upload the insight itself, you will not be able to see it here. It's a very common question, like if someone says, oh, I have an insight, but I cannot see it on the gallery. Inside the Alteryx Designer, you have to go and upload the insight and then upload the workflow. Next, one is the collections. So collections and districts are similar as we saw before. Districts are public and collections are more restricted. Here you can see that I have one collection. I can see the owner, when it was created, the number of workflows within the collection, the number of schedules within the collection, and here I can see the users. I can control very specifically which users have access to the collection, which users can edit the workflows on the collections, if they can update the workflows, if they can remove the workflows and everything. And if I have access on my profile to create collections, I'll see this new button here. If I click on it, it just asks me for a name. By default, it just sets to a date timestamp here, but I can erase this, create a name, and then I can create a collection here. Now, inside this training collection, I can see workflows, insights, schedules, AD users, user groups, and private studios. On workflows, I'll just be able to see the collections or workflows that were shared inside here. If I have enough access, I'll be able to add those workflows. And then when I click on add, I'll be able to see all of the workflows that I have on my workspace that are not yet on this collection. So if I had this one and click on add, it won't show up on the list anymore. Insights are the same thing. If I go to insights, I just click on add, I can add that report that I did. So nothing changes here. For schedules, I'll be able to see the frequency of the schedule, if it's active or not, because you can disable those if you want, or if they ended, they won't be showing as active anymore, and I can add them. And then to control users on the collections. So basically here we have enablement. So we ended up adding ED user that represents a lot of people here on data meaning, but we could have specific users. So let's say I can click here on add, I search my own name, and then I can give specific access to myself. So I can give myself admin access because I am an Alteryx admin. So I can give myself admin access. I can allow myself to add workflows to those collections, remove workflows from the collection, update them. So let's say I have Alteryx Designer. I can update the workflow and update it here. I can add or remove another users as well. And sometimes we use this expiration date. Let's say we have a consultant or someone, a third party on our company that needs to have this until the contract expire. We just leave this enabled and set the deadline for when the contract expires. So we don't have to go back here and remove the user. We don't have to remember doing this. The Alteryx will, the gallery will automatically expire the user access to it. And then user groups are the same thing. We can just go to the add group here and add groups. This needs to be predefined if depending on what type of access you have. Here we are using Windows AD access, Active Directory. So we have the groups defined there. And private studios are not going to be used anymore. So as I mentioned, before 21.4, we had private studios here, but after it, we just have my workspace. This option remains here, but you can see that I cannot even add something. So this won't be used anymore. Now for workflow results. Every time I run a workflow on the gallery, I can come here on the workflow results and see the final results. If I go to my workspace, open the workflow, I can also see it. But let's say I have like ran 4 or 5 workflows. I don't have to go one by one there and see the results on each one. I can just come here and see the final results. Also, if I have something scheduled, I won't be able to see it on my workspace. I have to come here and see the scheduled results here. This works the same way as the other one. So if I click here, I'll be able to see the log for the run. If I click on the job name here, I'll be able to see the results. If I click here, I'll open the workflow page. Here, I can erase it or rename this to make it easier to identify what happened. And then who ran, where it ran, which worker it was used, and so on. For schedules. Basically, when you upload a workflow to Designer, basically the main goal is to automate it. So when we want to automate workflows, we just schedule them. Here I open that test workflow and back on my workspace. And here I have the schedule option. Now this, I can click on this. If I couldn't, this means that my profile doesn't have access to schedule workflows. So you need to request it to your admin. But if I click on this here, I'll be able to see the scheduling window. Here I can set a schedule name, and then I have some options here. This first option is to just run it once. So I just set a start date, a start time, a time zone. Then I can set priority and also the worker. Priority is basically, let's say we have 5 workflows running at the same time. If they're all low, it's a random order. But let's say I have a medium, high, or critical workflow here, it will have a higher priority than the other ones. So if I have a critical one, I have a medium one, I have a low one, the critical one will run, the medium one will run, and then the low one will run. If you have multiple workers on your company, this might not be as important, because if we have like 3 workers and we have 3 workflows, each worker will take one. But let's say we only have 2 workers and 5 workflows running at the same time, then it's good that we specify this. Also, changing the workers assigned, as I mentioned, for example, let's say we have a sales worker, have a marketing worker, we can set them to run here on a specific one, to also don't make a long queue of workflows running. I can also add comments here if needed. Those comments are helpful if we have some sort of configuration or need to add something specific here, because you can see this later on the schedules tab. If I click on recurring here, I have some other options. So I have frequency. This can be hourly, daily, weekly. If you choose weekly, you'll be able to see which days of the week you can select, like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and so on. And monthly. If you select monthly, you can select a specific day, and then or you can select like first, second, third, fourth, or last week of the month, and then a day. So for example, first Sunday of the month, third Wednesday of the month. This is more specific when you select monthly. And also we have the custom option. So for the custom option, we basically have the days that we want to run, and then the months we want to run. This is very like particular, because we can run it on like the 10th day of January, the 15th of July, something like that. You can select a start date, time zone, similar as the other ones. And also for recurring and custom, we have the end one here. So if you want to run this until a date, you can just select this and specify the end date. But if you want to just run like from now until forever, you just leave this disabled and it will run. Now I created a custom example here. So you can see that it's going to run 9 a.m. on the last day of the month of August. So every year at the last day of August, this workflow will run. This is probably good for like closing dates workflow reports. Let's say the month is ending and we want to run a report of a closed data finance report or something. We can just specify it to run on the last day of each month and it to run. I also added a comment here, a very brief one, just to show how it's shown up. And if this has ran before, I will also be able to see the history here. Similar to how we see the histories of the workflows, I'll also be able to see the history down here of all the Alteryx running and all of the results and everything. And if this throw an error, I'll also be able to see the error here, the log and everything. Now, if I go to schedules, you can see that here I'm already on the schedule, but if I go to the schedules tab here, I'll be able to see it here. And if I click on the name here, I'll be sent back to this screen. But here I can see the schedule, I can see the workflow, if it's using AMP, the frequency, when it was created, last time it ran, next time it will run. So as I mentioned, it's going to run at the last day of August. Note that here it's set to 10 a.m., but here it was set to 9 a.m. It's very important to note the time zones you are seeing and you are scheduling stuff, because they might be changing if you are on a different place. So this was set to 9 a.m. at American New York time. But my gallery, back when I showed the profile, my gallery is set to show up America São Paulo time. So those times here, they will automatically update, but they can be a little bit tricky. So you can make everything the same one if you need. And then if we click here, we'll be able to see the description, as I mentioned. So if I need to add any sort of description, any sort of annotations or anything, I can add it here. Now, continuing this, let's go to the Data Connection Manager. This is a new tool after 21.4. So basically, the Data Connection Manager is used to connect to data sources or basically databases that you can connect to. Here I can add a new one if I want. Whenever I click on this, I'll be sent to a new screen where I can select the technology. Now, to select the technology here, we have a lot of options. This is new, but we have a lot of things already implemented. So I have Apache, Athena, I have Azure, IBM connections. Most common ones are Microsoft SQL, Mongo, Oracle, Snowflake, Salesforce. Snowflake has a lot of options, so make sure to select the right one here if you want. And then Teradata. There's a lot of things here that might be useful for you. In this example, I'm going to use this Microsoft SQL Server Quick Connect because it's the easiest one to make a connection. We just need to specify a few things. The other ones might request a data connection string. So if you don't know how to create one, you can ask your admin, Alteryx admin, or someone on your company that deals with infrastructure and database connections, so they might be able to find it. Now, if I click here, I selected the SQL Server Quick Connect. I had named it Data Meaning SQL Server. I added the server, so this is just an IP. I added the database, which I want to connect to, and then the driver. If you are unsure on how to do this, you can go to your Alteryx Designer, connect using an input tool on Alteryx Designer first, see the final results, and then just come here and copy and paste the data. So for example, I didn't know which driver I needed to select to make this connection. I went to Alteryx Designer, I used the input tool, I created a data source connection in Alteryx Designer using the same technology, and it showed me that my server was using this driver here. So I just went ahead, copied the driver from there, pasted it here. This way you'll be able to use it. I click on Save here, and then I'll be sent to the Details tab for my data source. Now, on this tab here, I'm able to see the things I just did. I can delete it, I can edit it, but the main part here are the credentials. So I have a connection, but how is Alteryx going to connect to it? Is it going to get AD users? Do I have to type them manually every time? Do I have to specify them prior to this? If I click here on Connect Credential, I can select many types of credential types here. So username and password, which is the most basic one. Azure Active Directory, Azure Active Directory Interactive. So the user has to type in the things here. Identity, Azure password, Azure Service Principal, just the username. If for some reason you don't have a password or the username is set to run without a password, or Windows authentication. For this example, I'm going to use username and password. Whenever I select any one of those, it's going to request me to select a credential. This is just the authentication method. I don't have any credential set up here for username and password, so it's asking me for a new one. But let's say that I have several credentials already created, they would show up here. So let's say I have a SQL Server credential, a Snowflake credential, a Teradata credential for username and password. They would all show up here. I could just select those and then click on link. As I don't have one, I click on create new. I'm going to see some new options here. I have to specify the name that I want, the user that I want, and the password that I want. And then I just click on create and link. It's going to create the data connection here, the credential here on this page, and also here. Now that this is created, this is still not ready to run. If you see here, no one has access to this credential because I just created it, but it didn't give access to anyone. So if I click on here on those dots, I can share, edit, or unlink. I'm going to hit share, and then I can create a share for users or custom groups. Users are just this simple person here, and user groups will show up down here on those multiple persons one. If I click on add user, I can just type in my name or anyone on my company that I want to add. I can hit add, and then I'll show up here. If I click on done, I'll show up down here. Now this is ready to run. If I go to Alteryx Designer, and connect to my gallery from Alteryx Designer itself. I can drag and drop an input tool. I can go to data sources. I can sync with the Alteryx Gallery, and I'll be able to see this DM SQL Server connection. I can click on it, and it will open this database where I can select the tables or do any queries I need. So to create data connection manager connections, you first need to create the data source, then you need to create the credentials, and then you need to share the credentials. Always remember to do those 3 steps. Otherwise, you might not be able to see the connection, or you might not be able to use it because the credentials were not set. Also, if you want to set the credentials prior to the data sources, you can click here. And then here on the credentials page, you can just add them. The options will be the same as before. You have to select the authentication method. You have to select the type. Just a quick second. The authentication method and the credential type. I'm back here. And then whenever you log in, you can also delete this or click on the name to add it if needed. And this was basically the presentation for the Alteryx Gallery. Went ahead for the workspaces, districts, insights, collections, workflow results, schedules, and also the data source manager, data connection manager. For the series map, we also have webinars on the following weeks. So we have one for the users upload and production process. So if you want to know how to upload your workflow to the gallery, like I just showed you workflows that are already on the gallery, but if you want to know how to do this, you can just see the next one. And then we have some other options for admins or some users here. For example, let's say I have an error. Please make sure to enter this one because this is useful for everyone. Do I need to call IT? We'll troubleshoot a lot of common errors, a lot of common stuff that users have errors accessing and everything. And then the other ones here are mostly for Alteryx admins. And then at the end, we also have API coverage for developers and admins. Our offerings related to Alteryx Server. So this is more of a data mining side. We basically offer assessment and planning. So if you want to add Alteryx Server to your company, we can go ahead and see if you really need the Alteryx Server, what size of server you need, how many workers you need, and everything. We can help you with the server installation. It's not, depending on the size of the Alteryx Server installation, it's not as easy, so we can help you with this. We can help you with migrations or upgrades. So let's say you are on 21.3 and want to upgrade to 21.1, we can help you with the upgrades. And also server health checks. Health checks are very important because whenever we run the workflows on the gallery, it's going to log everything, save data, and as time goes on, it might be hard to make sure that everything's okay and everything's correct. When users enter and join the company, we might not be able to know what's going on. So it's always helpful to have a health check on your server. We also offer trainings and managed services for your Alteryx server. Now about the questions. We received a few questions here, so we are going to open the session for Q&A. Let me open the questions we have here so we can get started. Okay, so we have a question here. Are there more options to discriminate between workflow versions, more than version 1 or version 2? So basically this, whenever we upload a workflow to Gallery and want to make sure that we are using the same workflow, it's going to add a new version. If we want to add a separate version, so for example, I have a workflow for a finance report. If I upload this once to the gallery, I'm going to have a finance report on the gallery as version 1. If I open it from the gallery in Alteryx Designer and change it and save it again, it's going to be a version 2. If I am on my machine and I open the version on my own machine, not the gallery version, my own version that I developed, and save it again, it's going to save as a duplicate one. So if I go to the gallery, I'll have a finance report version 2 that I have previously made, and I have a new finance report version 1, but the names might be confusing. So we always recommend just uploading a single version, and whenever you upload it once, always update it from the gallery. Otherwise, you'll start uploading a lot of copies. We also see some clients using, like, for example, finance report v1 and upload it, then finance report v2 and upload it. Sometimes it works for them. Oh, we just got a new question related to this one. So I'm just going to read it here. Can comments be attached for those comments or versions similar to GitHub? Yes, those can be added. So whenever we are uploading a workflow to the gallery, you'll be able to see it on the next webinar. You can define, you have a description box where you can set, like, for example, initial upload, or this upload represents an additional column added to the report. You can define comments, and when you are on the comment side, when you are checking the versions, you'll be able to see the comments there. It's just that when I did that version, I didn't have any comments, so that's why I wasn't able to see it. But yes, you can add comments to every single version you upload to your Alteryx Gallery. Another question here. How would you connect output generated by workflow running on server to Power BI? Now, what happens is we have a connector to Power BI. So whenever you are developing a workflow, let's say, for example, you grab data from an Excel spreadsheet and you want to save it to Power BI, but you want to schedule this to update on the gallery. Basically, what we do is we set the workflow to read the data, treat the data, and write to Power BI. I save this to the gallery, I schedule this, and whenever this runs, it's going to read the latest data that it was set to run. It's going to treat the data as I developed, and then it's going to save it to Power BI. For Power BI connections, there might be some tutorials on the community, how to connect to it. And it might depend on how you're authenticating and where it's sitting on your server and everything, your Power BI server. So that might be more a specific question on how it's treated up on your side. But yes, you can create a workflow to update the data to Power BI. Another question, apart from a timing trigger, are other triggers available? For example, existence of a certain file, a web page, status of a SharePoint site or list. The Alteryx Gallery only offers those time triggers, but you could create those triggers inside the workflow itself. So we had a client that we worked with, and he had the need for reading a file, making sure that the file was updated, and then running the workflow. If the file wasn't updated on that specific day, the workflow wouldn't run. So we set the workflow to run at, I think, 3 or 4 times per day. And each time it ran, it was going to check if the file was updated on that day and if the workflow wasn't ran on that day. Because if it ran at least once, let's say the first version at early in the morning already ran, I don't want to run the second, third, and fourth one. I just want the first one. But let's say that the file was updated in the middle of the afternoon and we had one scheduled at the end of the afternoon, then only the latest one would run. So you can create triggers inside the Alteryx workflow and then just time it on the gallery the way you want. Another question, can I run workflows with dependencies on another workflow in sequence if workflow B is dependent on workflow A running successfully? So when we design a workflow on Alteryx Designer, we have an option to chain the workflows. So for example, I ran workflow A. It ran successfully. It's going to run workflow B because it ran successfully. If workflow A didn't run, I can set on the Alteryx Designer workflow to stop running and stop any processing. So if I upload this workflow to the gallery with those settings and workflow A throws an error, workflow B won't run. If workflow A ran successfully on the gallery with those settings, then workflow B will run. Now, you can only run a workflow once on the gallery. So let's say I have a finance report again, and then I have a finance report in Power BI. I first want to set the finance report that prepares the data set, and then I prepare the Power BI one later on that just uploads the data to Power BI. So I can run the first one, which is workflow A. I can set it to run workflow B later. And we even have crew macros on Alteryx Designer, something we use a lot. The crew macros have a sequence tool that we can define workflows that are going to run. So for example, I have a definition of workflow A, B, and C on this tool, and I upload this tool to the gallery. Workflow A, B, and C we uploaded along with this tool, and I can just run it and it will run the other 3 workflows. So if you have like sequences, try checking the queue macros because it's way easier to use them. What is data source connection used for? After we upload workflow to the gallery with connection to a specific database, we need to set up the connection also in the server. The answer for this is it depends. So for example, we have that one I showed, the quick connect for the SQL Server. I need to at least have the driver on my machine and the driver for the SQL Server on the server machine. And it will work. I don't have to connect anything else. But if I'm using an ODBC connection, for example, I have to go to my machine ODBC settings. I have to create the ODBC connection on my machine. And then I need to replicate this on the Alteryx Server machine. Because when I'm using the Alteryx Designer on my machine, I'm going to use my connection. And if I upload this to the Alteryx Gallery, it's going to use the Alteryx Server ODBC connection. So yes, when you use ODBC, you need to make sure that both sides have the same configuration. If you are using some sort of DSN-less connection, like a connection string that can just pass off the configurations, you might not need to configure those. You just need to make sure that the drivers for the databases are installed on your machine and the server machine. If the driver is not installed, you get errors on it. Then another one here, when do switch from multiple many designer licenses to an Alteryx Server application? So basically, Alteryx Server, we use it when we have the need for other users on the company to run the workflows. If you have a company where you have like 3 developers and a lot of people in your company want to run Alteryx Designer, you might need to buy additional licenses. So for example, let's say I make a finance report. I'm the only developer in the company, but the finance department has like 10 members. If I don't have Alteryx Server, each one of those 10 members will need an Alteryx license. This is even one of the questions we have here. The users accessing the gallery needs a license, and that's a no. So the Alteryx Server, whenever we have the Alteryx Gallery, everyone on the company can access it without an additional license. So I don't need an additional designer license for people on the finance team to join the Alteryx Server Gallery. So I have a single license for my designer, and then I have a single license for Alteryx Server, and then the whole department for finance can access the gallery without buying anything extra. So usually we switch from designer license to server because of this. Depending on the size of our company and how many people want to run the workflows, it might be cheaper to have an Alteryx Server running, and then the users just go there and run the workflow, instead of having a lot of designer licenses and a lot of people trying to develop the workflows. And it's also good for versioning. So we don't have a lot of people opening the workflow and running into issues where someone might change a configuration or disconnect something, and then the workflow starts throwing errors, or changing the initial inputs, and then someone goes 5 or 6 minutes late and throws another error. So it's good to have the Alteryx Server for that. It makes our workflows more proof safe and more controlled in the development side. Now, one of the last questions we have here, could you please explain how to access the gallery? How do I publish a workflow? So whenever your company has an Alteryx Gallery, you have a link that you can access it. So you just open it on your browser. And then on the browser, you just log in. You might need to check with your IT team how to access it. Sometimes it will be a username and password. Sometimes you'll just be integrated with Windows authentication or Azure authentication, something like that. So it's fairly simple to access. You just need to request the link and see how to connect to it. And about publishing workflows, I'm not going to give a lot of spoilers because this is the next session, but on Alteryx Designer, you basically connect using the same link on the gallery. You have an option there to file, save as, private gallery, and then you just click on add the link to your gallery, and you are able to publish workflows there. But you need to be an artisan. Remember that. We talked about roles today. If you are not an artisan, you need to request that to your admin. Otherwise, you won't be able to upload anything. Now, those were the questions. Does anyone want to ask anything else about insights? Maybe difference between insights and Power BI and Tableau? Data connection manager, how to use it, or how the technologies are applied, or if there's any other things that we can add. Just waiting for a minute or two if some questions pop up here. We had a question here about districts. Just mentioning the districts, the question was, how can I add a workflow to a specific district if multiple tags are applied? Let's say, for example, I have a finance. I'm always using finance as an example, but let's say I have a finance district and a sales district. And then I want to add a workflow that applies to both. I can just use the tags for both, and then it will show up there. If I just want to make sure that as it's a public one, if I just want to add it to the finance one, I will just use the finance tag. If I just wanted to add to the sales one, I can just add the sales tag. Remember that tags needs to be created by your admin. So if you want to add a new one or you want a new district, ask your admin to do that. This was one of the last questions we had. I don't think we'll have any more. So if you want to contact us, reach out to us on info@datameaning.com. And if you want to book a free discovery call to learn more about Alteryx Server or Alteryx Designer, contact us at sales@datameaning.com. This is going to be sent out to your email, the recording. If you don't receive it, please let us know so we can send you the link. Thank you for attending and have a great day.